Hey everybody! That song's a bop. I'm gonna have to start putting it on all of my live chats from now on. Thank you so much to everybody tuning in from the nest. We're here at OwlCrate-A-Con. You're watching from page to screen. That's the panel that we're doing right now with award-winning author Becky Albertalli and New York Times bestselling author Soman Chainani. Thank you so much to you both for joining Tara and I today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here.
It was a little bit of a chaotic intro, wasn't it? That's okay. Hopefully we can keep the same weird energy. Everybody in the nest is saying hello. And I'm going to start with getting everybody to introduce themselves, if that's okay. So, Becky, let's start with you. A little bit of an elevator pitch for anybody who might not know who you are.
Yeah, so I'm Becky Albertalli, she, her, and I am best known for my debut, I would say, Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda, which was adapted into Love, Simon in 2018, and then was kind of like spun off into Love, Victor in 2020, which ran for 3 seasons. So Love, Victor is not based on any of my books. I'm just a fan of it, but it's like, I guess, like based on the universe. And then my most recent book, which came out in May, is called Imogen, Obviously.
Awesome. Soman?
And I'm Soman Chainani, author of the School for Good and Evil series, which was 6 books, 2 prequels, and then the movie came out from Netflix in October. The 6 books I started in 2013, and then the 2 prequels, Rise and Fall, The School for Good and Evil, were over the last 2 years. I also wrote a book called Beast and Beauty, which was a collection of fairy tales turned kind of sexy and horror for an older audience that Sony currently has to be made into a TV series. So that was sort of my fairy tale era, and now I'm working on something violently different that will take a very long time to get right, but it'll be a departure whenever it makes it to shelves.
Tara's having a moment right now.
I'm having a moment. So I try really hard not to fangirl during lives, but after your chat with Jordan at Y'all West, I did a deep dive into your work, and I got a first edition signed copy of Beast and Beauty.
Oh, no way. How cool.
And I love it. So I'm a new mom, and when he was still in potato mode, I read those stories to him.
Oh, so he's going to grow up totally messed up.
Listen, the kids always win. I think that's a powerful message. So I absolutely love that book, and I'm really excited to hear that it's maybe going to be made into something.
Well, I finished the pilot for it in April, like a final pilot. It took us about 6 months to get it right, and then the writer's strike happened. So the good news is the pilot's done, but the bad news is the whole town's kind of shut down. So who knows? No one knows what's going to happen now. It's sort of this kind of wild, wild west feel for whenever we come out of it. But I know that Sony is very committed to making it. We'll just have to see if it survives whatever the wreckage is after the end of the strike.
I think a lot of people are feeling like that right now. Obviously, I'm on the side of the writers and of the artists and content creators in Hollywood. While I love seeing my adaptations of my books and like books to shows, I like taking care of people a little bit more. So I hope we see like some good results coming out of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've been really shocked reading just some of the information that's been coming out, particularly from the actors, just because I knew so little about that industry of just like how little people are making on residuals. So it's been very educational for me. Yeah, it was on the side of the strikers by default, but like feeling very passionate about that. I already knew the writers were getting screwed. So we're with you guys. If anybody is watching this who's part of that strike.
The other problem I think that was interesting is, well, not really a problem, but for the last like 6 to 7 years, we've had this very flush content environment where so much stuff was getting made, and we saw so many adaptations come out But at the same time, the negative was there was so many options and people were so distracted with so much content that a lot of stuff fell through the cracks. And I wonder if at the end of this, it'll be fewer stuff getting made, but with the potential to find a bigger audience, So that's might be kind of like one of the outcomes of whatever happens. But I don't know. We'll see. I think this will be a long winter before it's actually solved, I suspect.
It just gives everybody a little bit more time to write on their other projects, right? Hopefully.
A lot of screenwriters are going to turn in novels.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
As a book fan, it sounds good to me. Let's jump into some questions. So, Soman, Becky, what was the experience like for you as an author to see your book adapted to screen for the first time? And how did it influence your perspective on storytelling and the creative process? An easy one to start, of course. Becky, do you want to start?
Yeah. What's so interesting too is I have a feeling that I think our answers are going to end up being kind of different, especially for the storytelling thing, since I know, Soman, you come from like a much more like you come from a screenwriting background originally, right? Yeah. So I don't. So it's going to be probably very different because it was all very new to me. I am like, I never thought I was going to be a published novelist. Like I'm a suburban mom kind of, and I wrote a lot of fan fiction, and everything was kind of a whirlwind with Simon. But with the adaptation, I loved I found it fascinating. Like I was able to be on set a lot just because it filmed in Atlanta, which is both roughly where the book is set and roughly where I live. Like, so I never got bored. Like I could watch these takes over and over and over again. And I was told that I was going to get bored, but I never did. And I would stay up late to do like that's a big deal for me to stay up late. And everything kind of leading up to it, I also found fascinating, but it was not until I was like actually on set that I believed they were going to film it. And then even after it was completed, I was like, well, it's probably not actually gonna like be finished and put in theaters, right? Like it just didn't seem like the kind of thing that could actually happen. So it was very surreal. I don't even think I ever wrapped my head around it. And it was intense. Like I love the film so much and I was very emotional about it. The experience of kind of, having this kind of maybe like well-loved kind of maybe mini cult classic-ish kind of midlist book, suddenly get this influx of attention was very complicated for me. But overall, I would say net positive, if only for the kind of absolutely unforgettable life experience bucket list kind of quality of it. So
it's funny because I wish I could have come in with no knowledge and because I think I would have enjoyed it more. Do you know what I mean? Because I think from Becky's point of view, when you come in with the no expectation of the book getting published and then the movie side, did it feel like you had won the lottery to some extent? Like you were just kind of like in Willy Wonka's land, enjoying every day of it? Like, did you have any negative like moments, or was it pretty much pure positive?
Oh, there were complicated, I was a debut author with no clout, and so there were some complicated.
That's the hard part. Even with, regardless of how many books you've published, when Hollywood starts working with your book, the author is the first one they would like eliminated from the picture. because you have all the answers. So as long as you have all the answers, they kind of want you, disappeared, because then you render them irrelevant, right? The director is irrelevant, the studio is irrelevant because you know everything, and you kind of like. I think watching what happened with George R. R. Martin on Game of Thrones was so interesting because at first it's like we want his input on everything. We want him to direct an episode every season. We want him there. And as the show got more popular and everyone got more power, the directors got more powers, you saw him marginalized more and more and more, because egos start to come into play and all of that. And so I think the hardest part for me was in a fantasy, at least in a I think a contemporary novel, you're kind of operating from the same language and world because you live in this world. But with a fantasy, it's very easy to be on the wrong page, which is why so many fantasy adaptations can be so horrendous. And so there was a long development process where writers were coming in and out and directors were coming in and out because they would try to take it, School for Good and Evil, in a completely different direction. And it would just never end up working. And I would be waving the red flag, being like, this is never going to work. But then they see you as the problem, the troublesome author, and don't want to engage with you anymore. And so, I learned early on kind of just to, until a director was shooting, just like Becky said, until we were on set and it was happening, you just don't take anything all that seriously. You sort of just consider it noise, and hopeful optimism. And then once the director is on, in our case, Paul Feig was locked in as director, that's when I got in the weeds and started, having to fight certain battles and push for things just to make sure that ultimately it was going to be an adaptation that fans, even if they didn't embrace, would not attack, and that I think requires an author's involvement from the beginning of a production, because you can't rescue it in the edit room. You have to be involved.
My question then would be, how do you develop that relationship with what effectively is a stranger who has their own artistic vision of your work? How do you develop the relationship with somebody so that you can make some of those decisions with them?
And they would like you. I mean, no matter who the director is, one in a million have a healthy enough ego where they can work with the author and be thankful for the author's presence. And I've worked with directors like that, but they're very rare. Most of the time, the director is going to feel some kind of threat from the author, obviously, because you have the entire thing in your head and you have the fans and you have everything. I think you just have to come at it from a very humble place and just be like, this is your movie. This stands and dies on your vision of it. It's your interpretation. It's not my movie. Because if it was my movie, I'd be directing it. So you have to come at it from, this is your interpretation. This is your world. Let me help you so that the fans are on your side. And that was always my position, which is I am not here as an author. I am here as the guy who's going to maximize your value to the fans. So here's what they want to see. Here's what's important. I don't know about this scene. This seems like it goes against this. So, and I did that enough day after day after day, where Netflix started to trust me and the director started to trust me and they started to bring me into basically everything, because I never fought for anything that wasn't predicated with me starting the sentence with, this is what the fans are expecting,
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there's a lot of like picking battles, and gosh, and like in my experience, especially, coming in, if you don't have any kind of clout, which I would say most authors coming in don't, part of it is just, you're kind of hoping that the team will be generally receptive and collaborative. So I felt like I got really lucky with Love, Simon. It wasn't it definitely, I was not involved in the way that I later found out that I would want to be. Like, I just was so new at it that it wasn't something I knew to push for at the beginning. Other contracts and things like that, like I have gone into these kinds of conversations, you know, just framing things pretty differently from the outset. And, you know, and we'll see if any stuff ever gets made and kind of what kind of difference that does or doesn't make. But, you know, ultimately, what I've heard a lot of authors say, and this is true for me too, is that like, you know, you have this, I hate the phrase trump card now for obvious reasons. But, you know, you have like, you know, your one kind of real piece of power is that like, if they do something that's like catastrophic, then, you know, and it would have to be pretty bad, then you could kind of, you know, talk about how you know, you could let them know that you wouldn't be able to publicly kind of be a part of the promo the way you wanted to be. And there was a moment like that with Simon, and they were very, very receptive to it. It's something that was extremely important to me and would have, if it had moved forward the way they sort of floated by me, like if you know, if I had not gone nuclear on that one issue, there would have been boycott. Like this movie wouldn't have landed. Like there would have been boycotts.
Yeah.
It is not something that would have been okay. It was a representation issue. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is the idea being that like when you're fighting battles and picking things, they're always going to respond slightly negatively, you know, to the author sort of wading in. And so you have to almost make sure that when you do pick the battle, you're going to win it, you know, that it is something that's so obvious that you're going to win it, because at least then you use your chips wisely. It's always dicey to weigh in on something where you don't know what the outcome is going to be. So I always tell authors, like, you know, make sure you pick a battle that you're sure of. At the same time, it's funny, Jenny Han gave me advice before I started with School for Good and Evil, where she was like, you know, it's hard to be kind of in. You're either all the way in or you should be all the way out. Because to be kind of halfway in terms of involvement, usually just leads to heartache and stress and madness, you know? And I think that's what I also tell authors for their adaptations, which is, you know, you can be all the way in and be involved in it 24/7, but then you're not going to be making new work, you know? And then you're sort of turning into less of an author and more kind of a producer. Which has never really my interest. So I think you also have to look at your goals. You know, in Jenny's case, she loves producing, loves being the showrunner on Some Right Turn Pretty, and is spectacular at it. But Jenny also is such an extrovert, loves collaboration, loves everything about kind of the process of making a show. Whereas I guess someone like me or an author like me would rather be writing a book. You know, so I think that's also so important as an author. What's your goal? Like, what is it you're trying to do? You know?
I mean, I actually don't think it has to be fully either or like that. There is a lot of heartache, I feel like, it comes with the territory, but it's, you know, it's hard. I think a lot of us, like, I know, like, if had I wanted to go all in and kind of be very involved like that, like, they would have, I don't know, like, I think they would have been nice about it, but that wasn't an option for
An
me.
option,
It
of course.
absolutely wasn't an option for me. And there was like something, and there is something to me and this is as a consumer of adaptations and also like being involved in that, like, I like seeing kind of the differences in the story and kind of the way it translates to a different medium, you know? So, so that's a cool thing. I don't like, um, you know, going into like, or it's not, I don't like, I don't want to ever go into it expecting it to be kind of a scene by scene replica. That's, you know, that's like the audiobook kind of, you know, but, you know, so I think, I would definitely hold on to the idea. Angie Thomas says it really well. Like, I think what she says is that they're like the book and the film are like fraternal twins, you know, I like that. And so I think if you are able to, for the most part, hold on to that, kind of celebrating the differences between the two, and just kind of, picking your battles very, very carefully for where you're gonna push, but for the most part, kind of rolling with the vision of the creative team that, like, hopefully you were able to have some input on the front end in picking them. Then I do think it can be a generally good experience. There are always going to be some hiccups, I would imagine, but yeah, like, I did like being involved. I wouldn't have wanted to be less involved. I don't know how much more involved I would want to be. Maybe a little bit more input than I had, but I do not think I would thrive in a Jenny Han role, because I do agree that's like it's an extraordinarily different skill set in my mind, and I'm kind of like in awe of her. I mean, I am in general, basically, but like because she's Jenny Han. But yeah, I don't know. It's tricky. It's hard to know like what you would choose when often we don't have the choice going into it, I think.
Well, also, I think the important thing is the leverage you have is the fans, right? So your leverage will always be that. So the more you build your fan base, even as simple as registering the Instagram name for your book as a movie, the different, because then the studio will have to take that from you. Like the more you can have leverage over certain things, those are concrete steps you can take to have more power when a movie adaptation potentially comes, and all those things serve me. Having a School for Good and Evil website, having a newsletter list of hundreds and thousands of fans, like that. Those things are things they needed, and because they needed those, it meant that therefore I needed to be involved on other things. So I think there are concrete steps, especially now versus 7-10 years ago, that an author can take to increase their leverage,
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Like, I mean, yes and no, because absolutely that is kind of where the leverage would come from. I think, like I file it kind of under the general like publishing fog of like, we don't know what, like, if we all had the ability to kind of garner hundreds and thousands of fans, then I think more books would have hundreds of thousands of fans, so I don't think that's 100% like concrete steps will always lead to outcomes. I was like, oh my gosh, I should have done that with Simon. I should have reserved the Instagram. And then I'm like, they changed the name on me.
No,
they would have
always going to be different.
So,
yeah, I think it's always going to be different. I think, and there's no way to guarantee that as an author you'll have any more power, but you can try to find pressure points where you can, and it just depends on what you're working with. I think certain studios, like I was with Netflix, and Netflix is very conscious of fan bases because social media is so key to their strategy, versus sort of a traditional Hollywood studio that isn't going to be relying so much on online social media and their accounts. Like Netflix's social accounts are what market their movies. And they don't do much advertising elsewhere. And so if they sense something is going to get backlash in the comments, that is very unnerving to them, and they're going to do everything they can to prevent that. So I think Netflix, and they're probably the one. I don't think Amazon's the same necessarily, but Netflix out of all of them is going to be the most conscious, I think, about bringing authors in. Because Lee Bardugo on Shadow and Bone, and I and a few other authors who've done Netflix adaptations have had similar experiences, where they are trusting you as the gatekeeper of the fan base. So I think it might be a situation also particular to Netflix.
It's a little bit different too, because streaming platforms, of course, have only started adapting books in the last couple of years, as opposed to going the route of more traditionally movies.
Yeah, and I think in our case, it's funny because there hadn't been a really big middle grade adaptation of sort of a fantasy book in a very long time. And so they were taking a big risk on School for Good and Evil. It's a big movie. It was over $150 million. And so it was interesting to see what is traditionally a Hollywood movie that at that scale would have been in theaters any time before Netflix, suddenly kind of part of the streaming universe. And so there was a lot of just like learning about how they market and how they do publicity. And that's really where I think the author ends up being the most value to them. And I feel like 90% of my involvement in the movie was in the marketing and publicity and recruiting of the fans to come out and see it, and creating the campaigns and that would get fans to go to, advanced screenings and things like that, that streaming kind of relies on. I don't know. I feel like in general, the streaming movie world is changing more and more, and you'll start to see a heavier focus on the adaptations being TV series because they're more novelistic. I'm not sure that the book adaptation to movie streaming platform is going to be all that strong in the years to come, especially after the strike.
Yeah, I would agree. Tara, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling like maybe we should give something away, though. It's been a pretty heavy topic so far. Should we try to... Everybody in the comments, by the way, I do want to say, as Tara's picking some winners, maybe you could pick a winner for Fiction Bath & Co. is going to be doing a candle. So if we can pick a winner for that would be great. But everyone in the comments is saying, despite it being a movie versus streaming service, we can all agree on one thing, and that's that the book covers that come out for it are terrible. It's the stickers.
It's the stickers, and they put the stickers on, the original too, so you're a little bit stuck. Because I think those stickers stay on a long time. I mean, the other interesting thing about those stickers is the book sells so much better with the stickers on. So as an author, you're kind of like, well, it's ugly, but it sells better. So what can you do?
What are your favorite covers for your books? Are they the OG covers, do you think, for you both?
My favorite cover of all time of any book ever is
Imogen is so pretty.
Yeah, Lenny Kaufman's masterpiece here. But there's not like a different, like there's no movie cover to compare it to of the Simon covers. I don't know. I love them all. They're just like all part of the family, and like the international editions. I love having a whole collection of different ones. I don't actually hate movie covers. I think, I think they're cool. I don't know that I would only want the option of having a movie cover.
Fair.
I think in our case, what was so interesting was that the original School for Good and Evil paperback is a little younger, the cover, because it's meant to be middle grade. But the movie cover is much more YA and much more kind of older. And so that was interesting to have two covers that sort of appeal to different audiences. And I think that's how it stayed. It felt like teenagers bought the cover that was more kind of YA adult, and kids continued to buy the originals. So I think that's another thing to bring up for an author maybe is that can you use your movie cover to recruit a different audience?
Yeah.
I've never considered that before. Can you use your movie cover to recruit a different audience? Soman, I think we need to have you here for like at least 3 or 4 hours, just to provide some advice on harnessing yourself as like a marketing tool, because this is very useful. I've never thought about that before.
I used to go into those meetings and be like, because the marketing and publicity things, that's just my origins in film were working for marketing publicity departments and then being a screenwriter. So that was sort of the language that I kind of understood and was able to actually help them with, And I think it's where I went from author to something else. Yeah, and I think that's where sometimes authors can get so focused on the creative part, like trying to change the script and stuff like that. But where you'll actually have the most impact, especially for a streaming platform, is if you can get in there and help them with the marketing and publicity.
Really good advice. We're going to go to more of a fun question, I think, because it's literally about fun. Becky, maybe you can start us off. Can you share some of the fun and exciting aspects of the adaptation process, such as like collaborating with the filmmakers and seeing your characters come to life?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, it was so much fun in general, and it like continues to be magical. Like I just saw Barbie, which is phenomenal. And I'm so proud of Alexandra's ship. Like, like it's just like, oh my gosh, like I still feel like I am gonna be like passionate fans of these actors for the rest of my life. Like yeah, any true for the Love Victor actors as well. And like, so I loved getting to meet and hang out with the actors and the like, just also to the producers and directors and certainly the writers, and also like just the people who had just various jobs that like weren't even on my radar particularly, like just the score, and different like movie editorial jobs and things like that. Like I found that to be really, really fun. I loved getting to film a cameo. I am in the Halloween party scene. I had to wear a mask because I otherwise would have looked like a teacher who went to a teenager's drunken Halloween party. So I was more like a 30-something at the time in a mask at the children's Halloween party. I loved all of that. I love the just the excitement about it. I love like getting to see just people's reactions to the trailer and kind of the different steps along the way.
I think it was the cameo part for an author is really, really fun. I think that's the part where, because it makes you feel valued, but B, also you get to be part of the universe. That was my second day on set. I had done a 10-day quarantine because it was during COVID. We were Netflix's first movie to shoot all the way through. There were no vaccines, nothing. Yeah. So it was super kind of strict and all that stuff. And the cool part was, because I was doing a cameo, I got to be in the pod with the actors. So I didn't have to wear a mask on set or anything like that. I was just able to like go and come freely. So after the 10-day quarantine, the second day I get there, they're like, okay, you're doing a cameo. This is what you're doing. And the cameo was to be in the teacher scene with all the teachers. So it was 8 hours at a table with, Kerry Washington, Charlize Theron, Lawrence Fishburne, Michelle Yeoh. And it was like, going from being in my head for 10 days to then like having this like very like immersive, intense experience. And it really was kind of the greatest whiplash of my life. But the good news, it was 8 hours. So you're shell shocked for the first like 10 minutes, but by hour 6, Carrie's taking off the bottom of her dress and she's in like jean leggings, and Michelle's like, like everyone's doing their thing, and so you start to see everybody just as humans, But I remember I didn't know. I'm so afraid of Charlize Theron because I'm such a huge fan of hers, and I was preparing like you have to have a line, you have to have something to say to her, And one of my favorite movies is the movie Showgirls. It's my guilty pleasure. And I had 2 nights before I went to film the cameo, I was listening to a podcast about the Mickey of Showgirls. And apparently she was the first choice originally for the Elizabeth Berkley character in Showgirls. So I was like, and then didn't get it because the director wanted Elizabeth Berkley ultimately. And I'm like, do I ask her about this? That was my first question. And I'm like, you cannot go on set and ask Charlize Theron about Showgirls. She's like an Oscar winner. And I'm like, don't ask her about it. But when that's in your head, and it's the only thing that's in your head, and you see her and you freeze like a deer in the headlights, my first question was, Hi, nice to meet you. Were you almost in Showgirls? Um, and she looked at me for a second with that sort of like stone-faced look, and then she goes, "That bitch stole my movie." And I was like,
I love her.
and I'm like, now we're friends. And I'm like, well, you're lucky. It probably gave you the career you have now. And she's like, you don't. And then of course that I stepped in it because she's like, you don't think I would have saved it? And I was like, I don't think so.
Oh no. So not only did you say the thing, but then you followed up with
Followed up.
Probably
But it was fun. It was. I think that's what made the cameo process so fun. Was you get to actually be in a scene in your own world. You know.
It's okay. That's like peak author meeting A-lister, you know, like that moment.
I mean, it was just a big ass movie. That's what was so crazy about the whole experience was just how large it was, you know. But for better or worse, you know, there's advantages to having your adaptation be small, and there's advantages to having it be large.
That's amazing. I don't know how I would have reacted in your situation because, like, for both casts, there are some huge names there. But we're going to shift gears a little bit. I have some winners to announce for our giveaways. So the winner for a candle from Fiction Bath Co. is, and I'm so sorry if I pronounce any of these usernames wrong, I have during every single one, is Abby MZ. Then we have two winners for Riddles Tea Readers Recovery Samples. We have Ada22, and I'm going to pronounce this as Hannah Scene Launch, because that's how it looks to me. And then we have an arc of Find Him Where You Left Him Dead by Kristen Simmons, and that is going to the Lovely Bookish universe. So congratulations to all of our winners. And then I am also going to shift gears to some questions from our nesties. So Ashley13 asks, which did you find yourself enjoying more? Books to movies or books to shows?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy both as a, as a viewer. I definitely really enjoy both. And there have been movies and shows that I've really loved. Obviously, with a show, there's more room to kind of capture more of the source material, which is cool. But, for the process of like being involved in the adaptation, I strongly prefer the film. And I think a lot of that, I mean, part of that is, and it's hard to really compare them because Love, Victor is not actually based on my work. I love the show itself. And I loved when I got to visit. But I think because TV moves so quickly, and because it wasn't filmed in Atlanta, I had a very hard time reminding them that I exist. Like I wanted to be a lot more involved than I was, and I tried really, really hard. But I think it just was more complicated, and there were kind of decisions that had to be made so quickly that I could not be looped into them, I guess. So.
And I think the advantage of a show is a show is like a novel, right? So you can really, adapt it in a way that can be scene for scene and really present it exactly as it is. In the School for Good and Evil's case, I feel like because it's a fantasy, a show would do better story-wise, and I know that that's what fans wanted. But very rare is the fantasy show where the effects don't look horrendous. Because the amount of money required, I think Shadow and Bone was rare in that the effects stood up, in Game of Thrones and maybe The Witcher, but there's just very few fantasy shows that can afford the budget necessary unless they are massive IP. I think so a movie's kind of going to be the best place where you're going to get something that looks good. Because School for Good and Evil, for a 2.5-hour movie, costs $150 million. So if you put that over 8 episodes, each episode is going to look much crappier, in comparison. Also, the other thing is the stars, right? You're not going to get, usually, you're not going to get big giant stars to star in a YA adaptation for TV. You're not going to get Charlize and Carrie and Lawrence to commit to 10 episodes. You just won't. So movies give you the advantage of the stars, the budget, the scale, but TV will give you the advantage of something more novelistic that fans will embrace. So, there's pluses and minuses to both. I also think that sometimes with movies these days, it's easier to get people to watch them because TV is such a time commitment, like in the case of School for Good and Evil, it was like about 80 million hours in the first 3 days. And you usually would never get that for, no matter how popular a TV series, you would never get that because it's divided over 10 episodes and all that sort of stuff. So you ultimately do get more eyeballs, I think, to a movie if it's marketed properly. I
don't know about you, Tara, but I've just learned that I might be single-handedly keeping some of these TV shows on Netflix. I watch a lot of TV.
I'm right there with you.
I'm a binge reader, and I'm definitely like a binge TV show movie watcher.
Are there any good adaptations that like nobody knows about that you've seen on streaming that you tell people about, like hidden gems that never like got the attention they deserved?
The Man Who Fell to Earth, and The Man in the High Castle. So both of those were very good. I forget which platforms they're on. Somebody will find it in the comments, I'm sure. They're both really good, but one of those books was written in like the 40s, 50s, and one was written in the 70s. So usually I find that the really good adaptations that you find on TV are from older work. And like I really like Foundation. So that's Asimov.
Yeah.
I've not read the work, so I probably enjoy it a lot better than like true blue Isaac Asimov fans because they've kind of chopped up some of his novels for it. But I just felt that the story is solid, the visuals are stunning, and the character development, Apple did it right there. I'm sure his fans don't think so, but as a TV fan, I think so.
It's funny. I was rereading The Secret History, which I do like every 3 years.
Oh yeah.
And then I did a deep dive on Donna Tartt interviews, and that particular book, I think like 12 different people tried to adapt it at certain points. I think Gwyneth Paltrow tried. I think Jake Gyllenhaal was going to star at one point. Like everybody tried, and ultimately she just changed her mind. And I think it's what she said was the book had become so kind of a classic, and had so much attention and everything that she didn't want faces attached to the characters. And that stuck with me. I thought it was a really interesting way of thinking about, authors are often craving adaptations, but it was an interesting rejection of the idea. And having, I thought, a pretty good reason, which was that book had become so part of the cultural imagination at that point that, why would you sort of limit yourself,
Yeah, I think that's
I can't say very, very much about that. That's fair. That's a really good reason. I have some other recommendations for you, Soman, coming in. Somebody said The Expanse. Yes, that was a fantastic adaptation. Enola Holmes, yes, but there were movies. So we're looking for series, my friends.
Enola Holmes is the book? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's out on Netflix. Yeah, and I only know this because it's Henry Cavill.
I've seen
the actress whose name fails me from Stranger Things.
I just didn't know that it was actually a book to start with.
Yeah, and then The Goldfinch. Oh, there's some pretty out there, like awesome little recs here. I'm gonna have to compile them for everybody. Okay, it's Millie Bobby Brown. Okay, I'm old, everyone, so I forgot. Sarah, do we have another question?
Yeah, we do. Okay, so Souls of the Dead asks, how do you go about making sure representation in your books will be good and correct on screen too?
I think that's a great question, and that is very much at the heart of just that is a reason that I do want more involvement and kind of have moving forward push for more involvement. And I think for somebody who was in the position that I was in, the only choice was kind of playing the trump card and then hoping that that you can't really, you can only play it so many times, and obviously other situations could come up, and that doesn't, there were things that I kind of brought up and talked about, and there were some things that I the characters maybe kind of are a little bit different in the books, but it's it's tough because you as an author don't always have that power, but definitely kind of, your readers, um, are kind of looking to you as their advocate kind of in that room, which, for me, that's something that I really value and take seriously. It's just, kind of butting up against the limitations of how receptive that particular team is with that particular issue. Um, and I will say too, um, when it comes to kind of the issue of representation in film, I kind of have to bring in real quick my little soapbox issue of kind of being mindful of the difference between, for example, whitewashing versus actor may or may not be queer, may or may not be out, and I think we do need to interrogate kind of some of our assumptions about kind of representation and how that actually plays out and could potentially play out with the kind of real people who are involved both in casting and kind of the actors themselves too.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember having this argument with Netflix too, where because I'm openly gay and there are a couple of gay guys at the School for Good and Evil, and they were like, they have to be played by gay actors, and I'm like, what? Since when? And they were like, no, that's the sort of ethos now and all that stuff, and I was like, okay, that seems weird to me. But it was, learning these kind of things where that's where the studio was at the time. I think now, 4 years later, there's been enough pushback on that where I think that's starting to change back to, things being a lot more fluid and not so, draconian on what certain representations have to be. At the same time, I wanted to make sure that casting-wise, the doors were wide open on everything, so that if the characters was white in the novel, they didn't have to be white in the movie, and if we just were able to find the best actor for every possible part, and I think that was sort of the prevailing guide for everything. Trying to throw the doors as wide open as possible, and I think you see that in the movie, which is why I think what made it different from a Harry Potter or something like that was that it felt much more kind of just inclusive of every possible kind of human on screen at that school.
Oh, I think that's such an important point too, and that and I think I think I should have been clear too that even in terms of race and stuff, there's a big difference between whitewashing a character who is canonically Black as an important part of, versus in Love, Simon, for example, one of the things I loved is the character Nick, who is, you know, I mean, I would say he's definitely coded white in like white Ashkenazi Jew like me, you know, but played by an Afro-Dominican actor, George Lindenberg, who is phenomenal. And I like, to me, that like just cracked that character open for me. Like that, I loved that interpretation of that character. So I think, you know, there are opportunities to become more inclusive, I guess, during the casting process. And yeah, I don't think it's, not everything has the same valence, I guess. Like it's okay to go from white to like more inclusive versus whitewashing a diverse book cast.
A really good example of that I love is Bridgerton.
Mhm.
Yes.
I was a longtime fan of the series. I think I read it when I was like 12. Don't tell my family. But it was a very long time ago. And I absolutely love what Shondaland has done with that world. And it's made it its own in many ways. And I think that there's a lot of really good things that come out of that artistic vision
Mhm.
of the companies that adapt, certain work. But I have to ask, knowing what you've gone through and like where you've come from, would you adapt any more of your work?
I think in my case, like with Beast and Beauty, I would be showrunner and exec producer on it, so I'd have a lot more control, but only because those stories are so specific and have such a kind of certain tone that I just don't think there's another way to interpret it unless I'm there, kind of shepherding it. So that's one case where I would step in and have more control. Other things I would happily. I have kind of a novella I wrote for Amazon called The Princess Game that got optioned by producers. And there I just am like, hey, kind of hands off and let them have their interpretation because the story is so clear on the page. So I think it just depends. You have to treat each work and figure out your involvement with it. Because I think some you're going to feel more attached to and more determined to reflect completely in the image you want, and others you're going to be like, sure, go, let's see what they do with that one. Everyone, I think I'll have a different reaction to, but at the end of the day, an adaptation does bring more eyeballs to it. The question is, will it be a good enough adaptation to not cast sort of a weird negative glaze on the material? And that's where you have to really play the casino, because if you get like a really bad adaptation, it can sort of haunt the work.
Yeah, I definitely would, but very different kind of structure from the beginning. I have, I guess I have like 3 other projects that are out there. One of them's not announced. One of them I don't think is going to happen. Various stages of development, but all 3 of them and any other project moving forward, I enter into like the negotiations at the beginning, being very prepared to walk away if I don't have some kind of very clear input. And I'm also like, I'm pretty, when it comes to like the content of it, I'm like, do your thing. It doesn't need to be exactly based on the book, but it was fraught sometimes, to not have that input, to kind of have these really just ongoing conversations kind of erupting around these pieces of media that were related to my books, the media that I passionately love as a fan, and that I feel very connected to, but also like they're different interpretations of the story, and sometimes elements from that media was kind of interpreted in a way to kind of draw conclusions about me personally, that ended up affecting, my life in very tangible ways over the last couple of years. It's very high stake. It feels very high stakes for me to kind of consider entering into another adaptation relationship, because last time, in a roundabout way, it ended with me feeling pressured to out myself online, and I can't, like, that can't happen again because it's happened, but I'm like, I don't know. I feel like that control, having just a little bit of control behind the scenes, maybe could have protected me a little more.
It might have, and I'm sorry that that happened to you. I remember it very well, and remembering that it was not okay. It's going to continue to never be okay to out anyone or feel like you have to go through that process. Because that's a very personal journey. And I know for a lot of authors, you're putting yourself a lot of the time into your work. And I'm sure that when you see that self and those ideas and those pieces of you come out on screen, it can be probably difficult in many ways, or you might have complicated feelings about it. Some joyful, I'm sure, like Soman's magic and things like that. And then some very real. And I think that as readers and as fans, as someone said, we're also the gatekeepers, and we should be the gatekeepers of the authors who we are fans of. And when we need to step up and say, on behalf of our individual communities, hey, not cool. I hope that in the future, Netflix and streaming services listen to us all a little bit more.
And they do a funny story to kind of end it, which was originally they didn't have my based on the book by on the poster because of contractual things and a whole nightmare.
I was wondering about that.
And the fans got so pissed when they revealed the first poster that they changed it the next day.
I love that.
Yeah. Like they sandbagged everything, being like, if he's not on it, then it must be a shitty movie because he must not be supporting it. And they were like, oh. And they went into it and they changed it. So simple as that.
Don't mess with bookworms. You can't do that. You can't do that. So.
Very passionate community. Tara, let's end this though on a really fun note.
Yes. Okay. So I would like to know what your adaptation. Oh my goodness, my words. I would like to know what your adaptation recommendations are.
What should we be watching?
This is such a good question. Let me think. I'll tell you what I want to see adapted, and if no one adapts it, I'm going to do it myself. Which is If We Were Villains by ML Rio, which is the best and should be made immediately. So I feel like that would be one that I already have adapted in my head, and I think everyone should read that book, especially for fans of Secret History, because there's no question that book is deeply influenced by Secret History.
All right, so I'm not gonna just say Heartstopper because everybody who knows who I am has already seen Heartstopper like 30 million times, as we all should. But no, okay. Here's one that I super recommend, and I hope just will continue to gain viewers, is On the Come Up, Angie Thomas's second adaptation. I love that book, and I loved the film. So I want to say it's on Paramount Plus, I think. But correct me if I'm wrong. If it's not, go with what Google says. But do watch it because it's fantastic.
Amazing. Thank you both. Those are excellent recommendations, and everybody's talking about it in the comments. Everybody's going, yes, Heartstopper, which has been like a really big hit. Everybody's absolutely loving it. I want to say thank you to Soman and Becky for joining us today from page to screen here at OwlCrate-A-Con. There was a lot of thoughtful, insightful conversation going on, and everybody loved it. I want to thank everybody who tuned in to watch and for making this event so fun and successful. Don't forget, you can catch a replay of this panel and any of our past lives and author chats right here in the Nest under the past author chats and live streams folder. I am uploading them today. And be sure to tune into our next panel, which is Publishing Insights. And that's going to be live here in the Nest at 4 p.m. Eastern with Nest Mods, Maggie, and Ashley. So that's going to be a lot of fun too. I hope everybody had a lot of fun. Everybody saying bye, thank you, bye, love you, Becky, love you, Soman.
Thank you guys for having us. This was awesome.
Yeah, this is really fun. Thank you so much.
We'll have to come back. You'll have to come back and do it again.
Definitely.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.